The stars belonged to the Vorthak Empire. They had owned them for 3,000 years. Every planet, every moon, every space station in the galaxy paid tribute to Emperor Thakmor. Those who refused were destroyed. Those who resisted were enslaved. Those who submitted lived another day under the iron boot of imperial rule. Supreme Admiral Gorthek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the World Breaker. Through the massive viewing window, he watched as another planet burned. The blue and green world of Nexara had tried to hide their children from imperial harvest ships. Now their cities were ash and their people were learning what defiance cost. "Status report," Gorthek commanded. His voice carried the authority of 1,000 conquered worlds. "Nexara pacification complete, Supreme Admiral," reported his aide. 17 million new slaves acquired. Resistance leaders executed. Mining operations will begin within the cycle. Gorthek nodded. This was how the galaxy worked. The strong ruled. The weak served. The Empire had perfected this system across countless star systems. They had cataloged every intelligent species in the known galaxy. They knew their strengths, their weaknesses, their breaking points. The Keltharians were excellent workers but poor fighters. The crystal beings of Altera made beautiful art before the Empire shattered their cities. The hive minds of Zephyr provided perfect soldiers once their queens were controlled. Every species had been conquered, cataloged, and put to use. "Send word to the outer sectors," Gorthek ordered. "Increase tribute quotas by 15%. The Emperor wants more ships for his fleet." Across the galaxy, billions of enslaved beings received the news in silence. They had learned not to cry out. They had learned not to resist. Hope was a luxury the Empire had beaten out of them generations ago. But in a small corner of space, far from the Empire's core worlds, something moved in the darkness between stars. Captain Hyunwoo Kim floated in zero gravity, checking the navigation systems of the UES Defiance. Earth's first deep space exploration vessel was 3 years into its mission to map the outer rim of the galaxy. So far they had found empty systems, dead worlds, and the occasional space debris. It was not what Earth Command had hoped for when they launched humanity's first interstellar expedition. "Captain, you need to see this," called Navigator So Young Park from her station. Her voice carried a note of concern that made Hyunwoo push off from the wall and drift quickly to her side. "What is it, Park?" "I'm picking up signals, sir. Multiple frequencies. They're faint, but they're definitely artificial." So Young's fingers danced over her controls, adjusting receivers and filters. "Sir, these aren't random transmissions. They're distress calls." Hyunwoo studied the readouts. The signals were coming from dozens of different sources, scattered across several star systems. More disturbing was the pattern. The calls were all similar in structure, despite coming from what appeared to be completely different species. "Get me Engineer Lee and Communications Officer Choi," Hyunwoo ordered. "And wake up the linguistics team. We might have just found what we came looking for." 20 minutes later, the senior staff gathered in the Defiance's small briefing room. Engineer Dongmin Lee rubbed sleep from his eyes while Communications Officer Yoonji Choi spread printouts across the table. The linguistics team, led by Dr. Young Soo Han, huddled around a portable translator unit. "Report," Hyunwoo said simply. Yoonji cleared her throat. "Captain, we've isolated 47 distinct distress signals. They're coming from at least 12 different star systems within a 50 light-year radius. Dr. Han's team has made some progress with translation." Dr. Han looked up from his work. "Captain, this is preliminary, but the messages are all asking for help." "More specifically, they're all asking for help against something called the Vorthak Empire." Silence filled the room. Earth had developed in isolation, focused inward on solving their own problems. They had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now it seemed they had stumbled into the middle of someone else's war. "What kind of help are they asking for?" Hyunwoo asked. "Freedom, sir," Dr. Han replied quietly. "They're asking to be freed." Dongmin leaned forward. "Sir, if there's really an empire out here enslaving other species, we need to report this to Earth Command immediately. This changes everything." Hyunwoo nodded, but his mind was already working through the implications. Earth had sent the Defiance to explore, not to fight. They were scientists and explorers, not warriors. Their ship was armed, but only for basic protection against pirates or hostile wildlife. They had never imagined finding something like this. "So Young, how long would it take to reach the nearest source of these transmissions?" he asked. The navigator consulted her charts. "The closest signal is coming from a system about 6 light-years from here. At maximum speed, 36 hours. "Sir," Yoonji interrupted, I'm receiving a new transmission. This one's different. It's much stronger and it's in real time. She activated the main speakers. Through the static came a voice speaking in an unknown language, but the tone was unmistakable. Terror, desperation, a final plea for help that would never come. Dr. Han worked frantically with his translation software. Slowly, words began to appear on the screen. They're coming. The harvest ships are here. Please, if anyone can hear this, remember us. Remember that we tried to be free. The transmission cut to static. The room fell silent again. Every person present understood what they had just heard. Someone, somewhere, had just died asking for help that would never arrive. Hyunwoo stood slowly. As captain of humanity's first deep space vessel, he faced a choice that would define not just his mission, but possibly his entire species' future. They could turn around, report to Earth, and let the politicians decide what to do. They could continue their exploration mission and pretend they had never heard these calls for help. Or they could do what every human instinct told them to do when they heard someone cry out in the darkness. Set course for the nearest distress signal, he ordered. Maximum speed. Sir, Dongmin said carefully, we don't know what we're flying into. This empire, whatever it is, it sounds big. We're just one ship. Hyunwoo looked around the room at his crew. These were Earth's best and brightest volunteers who had left everything behind to push into the unknown. They had joined this mission to discover what was out there among the stars. Now they had found something that challenged everything they believed about their place in the universe. We're humans, Hyunwoo said simply. We don't walk away when people need help. We'll figure out the rest as we go. The Defiance changed course, turning toward a system where someone was crying out for salvation. Behind them, Earth continued its quiet existence, unaware that its children had just declared war on the most powerful empire in the galaxy. In the depths of space, ancient evil was about to meet something it had never encountered before. Something that would not bow, would not break, and would not accept that the strong had the right to crush the weak. The Vorthak Empire had ruled for 3,000 years. They had conquered every species they had ever encountered. They believed they knew everything there was to know about warfare, about power, about the nature of the universe itself. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The age of empire was ending. The age of humanity was about to begin. The UES Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kelthera system. Captain Hyunwoo Kim stood on the bridge, watching the main screen as their sensors painted a picture of horror. 3 massive ships hung in orbit around the 4th planet. They were unlike anything in Earth's databases. Each vessel was over 2 kilometers long, built like floating fortresses with thick armor plating and weapon arrays that could level cities. But it was what they were doing that made Hyunwoo's blood run cold. Captain, Navigator So Young Park said quietly, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. Those ships are bombarding population centers. Communications Officer Yoonji Choi looked up from her station with tears in her eyes. Sir, I'm picking up thousands of transmissions from the surface. They're begging for help. They're saying the Vorthak are taking their children. Through the static-filled communications came voices crying out in languages no human had ever heard. But pain and terror needed no translation. Parents screaming for their young ones, children calling for mothers who would never answer. Distance to those ships? Hyunwoo asked. 40,000 kilometers and closing. So Young replied, Sir, our vessel is much smaller than those things. Each one of them outguns us 50 to 1. Engineer Dongmin Lee checked his readings. Captain, those ships are using some kind of beam weapon to disable ground targets without destroying them completely. They're not trying to kill everyone. They're capturing them. Hyunwoo watched the alien ships continue their methodical harvest of an entire civilization. Everything humanity claimed to believe in demanded action. But everything military training had taught him said this was suicide. Sir, said Commander Tae-hyun Shin from the tactical station, recommend we withdraw and report to Earth Command. We need reinforcements. By the time reinforcements arrive, there won't be anyone left to save, Hyunwoo replied. He took a deep breath. Red alert. Battle stations. We're going in. The bridge crew stared at him in shock. They all knew the odds. They all understood what he was asking them to do. Sir, Dongmin said carefully, those ships are massive. Our weapons might not even scratch their armor. Then we better get creative, Hyunwoo replied. Yoonji, open a channel to those ships. The communications officer worked at her station. Channel open, Captain. Hyunwoo straightened his uniform. Vorthak vessels, this is Captain Hyunwoo Kim of the United Earthship Defiance. You are ordered to cease your attack on the planet immediately and withdraw from this system. The response came quickly in heavily accented but understandable human language. Unknown vessel, you will identify yourself and submit to Imperial authority. Interference with Imperial operations is punishable by destruction. I just did identify myself. Hyunwoo replied calmly. Now let me make something clear to you. Release those people and leave this system or we will make you leave. Laughter came through the speakers. Primitive vessel, you are outnumbered 3-1. Your ship is a fraction of our size. Withdraw now and you will be permitted to surrender your technology and join our slave fleet. Hyunwoo smiled grimly. Counteroffer. Surrender now and we won't have to embarrass you in front of your emperor. The channel went dead. Moments later, all 3 Vorthak ships turned toward the Defiance and began accelerating. Here they come, So Young announced unnecessarily. Commander Tae-hyun studied his tactical displays. The Vorthak ships were moving in a standard formation, treating the single human vessel as a minor nuisance to be swatted aside. That was their first mistake. Dongmin, power up the adaptive defense grid, Hyunwoo ordered. Tae-hyun, prepare quantum torpedoes but don't lock on yet. Let them get closer. Sir, with respect, letting them get closer seems like the exact opposite of a good strategy, Dongmin said while working frantically at his console. Trust me, Hyunwoo replied. These ships are built for fighting enemies who use the same technology they do. We're about to show them what happens when they fight something completely different. The lead Vorthak ship opened fire when they reached 20,000 kilometers. Massive energy beams lanced through space toward the tiny human vessel. But where the beams should have torn through metal and flesh, they struck something impossible. The Defiance's shields didn't just absorb the energy, they adapted to it. Each shot that hit the human ship made the shield stronger against that type of weapon. Impossible, came a confused voice over the communications channel. Your shields are strengthening. What kind of technology is this? The kind you get when you evolve on a planet that spends most of its time trying to kill you, Hyunwoo replied. Then he switched to internal communications. Tae-hyun now. The Defiance launched 6 quantum torpedoes. But these weren't the crude explosive weapons the Vorthak expected. As they flew toward their targets, the torpedoes scanned the enemy ships, analyzed their defenses, and reconfigured themselves to exploit weaknesses that their creators didn't even know existed. The first torpedo struck the lead ship's shield generator. Instead of exploding, it phased through the shield and detonated inside the generator itself. The massive Vorthak vessel suddenly found itself defenseless. The second and third torpedoes hit the ship's engine core. The explosion tore the 2-kilometer vessel in half. The remaining Vorthak ships tried to retreat, but the Defiance was faster. Earth had built their exploration ship for long journeys through unknown space. That meant engines that could outrun anything and shields that could survive anything. 20 minutes later, all 3 Vorthak ships were floating debris. Damage report, Hyunwoo called out. Minor hull scarring from their first volley, Dongmin replied, sounding amazed. That's it. Everything else is green across the board. Communications from the planet's surface, Yunji announced. Thousands of transmissions. They're calling us gods, liberators, saviors. They want to know who we are and where we came from. Hyunwoo looked at the tactical display showing the wreckage of 3 ships that had seemed impossible to defeat. Each Vorthak vessel had carried crews of thousands. He felt no joy in their deaths, but he felt no regret either. They had made their choice when they started stealing children. Tae-hyun, send a recovery team to board those wrecks, he ordered. Download everything you can from their computers. I want to know what we're really dealing with out here. Commander Tae-hyun suited up and led a boarding party to the least damaged Vorthak ship. What they found in the enemy databases horrified even battle-hardened soldiers. Star charts showing thousands of enslaved worlds. Records of entire species wiped out for sport. Technical specifications for weapons designed specifically to cause maximum suffering. But most disturbing were the military records. The 3 ships they had just destroyed were considered a minor patrol force. The Vorthak Empire commanded tens of millions of vessels across the galaxy. They had never lost a battle. They had never retreated from a fight. They had conquered every species they had ever encountered. Dr. Ji-hai-1, the ship's science officer, studied the alien technology with fascination and growing horror. Captain, according to these records, the Empire has been doing this for 3,000 years. They've enslaved billions of sentient beings across the galaxy, And this was just one small operation. When the boarding teams returned, Hyunwoo called a meeting of his senior staff. The data they had recovered painted a picture of evil on a scale that humanity had never imagined possible. Options? He asked simply. We could head back to Earth, suggested Navigator So Young. Report what we found and let Earth Command decide what to do. By the time we get back and Earth mobilizes a response, how many more worlds will be enslaved? Dr. Wan asked quietly. Commander Tae-hyun looked up from the tactical data. Sir, according to these records, there's a major Vorthak fleet operating 2 systems from here. 50 ships conducting what they call a harvest operation on a world with over 1 billion inhabitants. Hyunwoo studied the faces around the table. These people had volunteered to explore the unknown. Now the unknown had shown them something that challenged everything they believed about their duty as human beings. We're one ship against an empire, Dongman pointed out. Even if we can beat their patrols, what happens when they send real forces after us? Then we'll deal with that when it happens, Hyunwoo replied. He activated the ship's internal communications. All hands, this is the captain. I want you to know what we've discovered out here. He told them about the empire, about the slaves, the harvests, the billions of beings crying out for help that would never come. He told them about the choice they faced, return home to safety or stay and fight for people they had never met. When he finished, the vote was unanimous. They would stay, they would fight, and they would send a message to this empire that some things would not be tolerated. Hyunwoo composed a message and broadcast it on all known Imperial frequencies. This is Captain Hyunwoo Kim of the Human Coalition. Your reign of terror ends now. Surrender and we will show mercy. Resist and discover why evolution made us apex predators. The Defiant set course for the next Imperial operation. Behind them, the freed people of Kelthera began to hope for the first time in generations. Across the galaxy, an empire that had never known defeat was about to meet its match. Supreme Admiral Gorthek stood in the throne room of the Worldbreaker, watching Emperor Thakmor pace back and forth across the polished metal floor. The Emperor's rage filled the massive chamber like a storm cloud ready to break. Show me this message again, the Emperor commanded. The holographic display activated, showing the human transmission that had been received across the Empire's communication networks. Captain Hyunwoo Kim's face appeared, calm and determined, delivering his impossible ultimatum to the most powerful force in the galaxy. This is Captain Hyunwoo Kim of the Human Coalition. Your reign of terror ends now. Surrender and we will show mercy. Resist and discover why evolution made us apex predators. The War Council erupted in laughter. General Velthor, commander of the Empire's 7th Battle Fleet, wiped tears from his eyes. Apex predators. Supreme Admiral, this creature comes from a species we have never even catalogued. They destroyed 3 patrol ships and think they can challenge us? Admiral Korthak, veteran of 100 conquered worlds, shook his head in amusement. 3,000 years, Your Majesty. 3,000 years we have ruled this galaxy. We have broken the crystal cities of Altera. We have tamed the hive minds of Zephyr. We have turned the warrior races of Korvash into our personal guard dogs. And now some unknown species from the Outer Rim thinks they can threaten us? Emperor Thakmor stopped pacing and turned to face his assembled commanders. His ancient face bore the scars of countless battles, the marks of a ruler who had personally led the conquest of half the galaxy. How many ships do we command across all sectors? 12 million active vessels, Your Majesty, replied Fleet Coordinator Morthak. With reserves and construction yards, we can field 20 million ships within 2 cycles. And these humans attacked us with how many ships? 1, Your Majesty. A single vessel of unknown design. The Emperor's laughter filled the chamber. 1 ship. 1 insignificant vessel from a species we have never heard of. And they think they can end us. He turned to General Velthor. Take the 47th Battle Fleet. 500 ships should be more than enough to handle this threat. Make an example of them. I want every species in the galaxy to see what happens when insects try to challenge gods. General Velthor bowed deeply. It shall be done, Your Majesty. Should we attempt to capture their technology? Study it if you can, the Emperor replied with a wave of his hand. But I care more about the lesson this will teach. Let every enslaved world see the wreckage of their would-be saviors. As the War Council dispersed, one figure remained behind. Intelligence Officer Mordak had served the Empire for 60 years, analyzing threats and predicting enemy movements. He had a talent for seeing patterns that others missed, which had saved Imperial fleets countless times. You have something to add, Mordak? Supreme Admiral Gorthek asked. The intelligence officer hesitated. Supreme Admiral, I have studied the wreckage from Kelthera. Their technology is unlike anything in our databases. Their weapons adapted during combat. Their shields grew stronger under fire. Their tactical responses showed creativity that our rigid doctrine cannot match. They destroyed 3 ships, Gorthek replied dismissively. 3 ships out of 12 million. The 47th Battle Fleet will erase them from existence. With respect, Supreme Admiral, what if they do not fight like other species? What if their strength is not in their numbers but in their methods? Gorthek's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting that 500 Imperial warships cannot handle one primitive vessel? Mordak straightened. I am suggesting that we do not yet understand what we are fighting. This species calls itself Human Coalition, implying multiple worlds, yet they attacked with one ship. Either they are fools or they know something we do not. Your concern is noted, Gorthek said coldly, but irrelevant. No species in the galaxy can stand against the Empire. These humans will learn this truth and then they will die. Mordak bowed and left the chamber, but privately he began preparing detailed analyses of the human technology. Something about their tactics troubled him deeply. The Empire had won every battle for 3 millennia by overwhelming force and superior numbers. But what if they faced an enemy that did not fight by the same rules? Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Captain Hyunwoo Kim received an encrypted transmission from Earth. The message had taken 3 months to travel through the quantum relay network that connected humanity's scattered planets. Admiral Young-Ho Park's face appeared on the screen, wearing the uniform of Earth's Space Defense Force. Captain Kim, your initial reports have reached Earth Command. The news of what you've discovered has shaken the entire planet. We're mobilizing everything we have. Hyunwoo felt relief flood through him. Earth understood the threat. I'm departing immediately with the Second Fleet. Admiral Park continued. 30 ships carrying our finest crews and most advanced technology. But more importantly, Captain Haewon Jung's science team has been working around the clock studying the Imperial technology you transmitted. They've made some remarkable discoveries. The message shifted to show Captain Jung, a brilliant engineer who had revolutionized human ship design. Captain Kim, the Vorthak technology is powerful but inflexible. It's designed by a species that has never faced real opposition. We've improved on their designs and created countermeasures for their weapons, but we need more data. Keep fighting, keep learning, and keep showing them that humanity does not bow to tyrants. Admiral Park returned to the screen. Earth's entire industrial capacity is being converted to war production. Every shipyard, every factory, every research facility is now dedicated to one goal, giving you the tools to fight this empire. Help is coming, Captain. Hold the line until we arrive. The transmission ended, leaving Hyunwoo alone with his thoughts. 30 ships were better than 1, but against 12 million the odds were still impossible, unless humanity could do what they had always done best. Find a way to win when winning was impossible. Communications Officer Yoon-ji Choi interrupted his thoughts. Captain, we're receiving multiple distress calls from the Vorthan system. Imperial forces are conducting a major harvest operation there. Navigator So-Young Park checked her instruments. Sir, it's 12 light years from here. We could be there in 18 hours. On how many Imperial ships? Hyunwoo asked. Unknown, sir, Yoon-ji replied. But the calls mention hundreds of vessels. Commander Tae-Hyun-shin looked up from his tactical station. Sir, if they're sending that many ships to one system, it might be a trap. They could be using the harvest as bait to draw us in. Engineer Dongmin Lee nodded in agreement. Captain, our success at Kelthera was based on surprise and superior technology. If they're ready for us now, we might not have those advantages. Hyunwoo considered his options. The safe choice was to wait for reinforcements from Earth. But safety meant abandoning billions of innocent beings to slavery and death, and humanity had never chosen safety when others needed help. Set course for Vorthan, he ordered. Maximum speed. Dr. Ji-Hai-Won worked frantically in her laboratory, analyzing captured Imperial data and searching for weaknesses they could exploit. The Empire's technology was brutally effective, but it had been developed through conquest, not innovation. They copied the best features from defeated species but never truly understood the principles behind them. Humans, by contrast, had spent centuries fighting each other with increasingly sophisticated weapons. They understood war in ways the Empire could not imagine. More importantly, they understood adaptation. Every human military doctrine emphasized flexibility, creativity, and the ability to change tactics mid-battle. "Captain," Dr. Wan called over the intercom, "I've found something interesting in the Imperial database. Their ships are networked together for coordination, but the network has vulnerabilities. If we can exploit them, we might be able to turn their numbers against them." As the Defiance raced through space toward another desperate battle, General Velthor assembled the 47th Battle Fleet at the Imperial staging area. 500 warships formed up in perfect formation, each one capable of destroying a planet single-handedly. "Warriors of the Empire," he broadcast to his fleet, "we hunt a new species today. They call themselves humans and they think they can challenge our dominance. They destroyed 3 ships and declared war on us. Today we will show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the Empire." The massive fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading for the Kelthara system where intelligence suggested the humans would return. 500 ships against 1. The largest military response in Imperial history against a single enemy vessel. It never occurred to General Velthor that he might not have brought enough ships. Back in the throne room of the Worldbreaker, Emperor Thakmor received reports from across the galaxy. Rebellions were starting on slave worlds. Species that had been broken for generations were beginning to whisper about hope. The word human was spreading like wildfire through underground resistance networks. "This ends now," the Emperor declared. "Send word to all sector commanders. Any world that rebels will be destroyed completely. No slaves, no resources, no survivors. Let them understand the price of following these human fools." But in the depths of Imperial intelligence, Mordak continued his analysis of human tactics and technology. What he found kept him away. The 47th Imperial Battle Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kelthara system, in perfect formation. 500 warships arranged in the classical Imperial battle formation, ready to crush whatever primitive resistance they might encounter. General Velthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator studying the tactical displays. His sensors showed something impossible. Where he expected to find one small human vessel hiding among the asteroids, he found 60 ships arranged in a formation that made no sense to Imperial tactical doctrine. "Analysis," he commanded his tactical officer. "Unknown formation, General. The enemy vessels are spread across multiple vectors with no central command ship visible. Their positioning violates every principle of space warfare we know." Velthor studied the display more carefully. The human ships were indeed spread out in what looked like random positions. No concentrated firepower. No protective screening for larger vessels, no clear command structure. It looked like suicide. Size comparison? "The enemy ships are roughly half the size of our cruisers, General. Combined, they represent perhaps 5% of our total firepower." General Velthor felt a moment of disappointment. He had hoped for a real battle, something worthy of his reputation. Instead, he found a handful of primitives who did not even understand basic military tactics. "Open communications," he ordered. "Let me speak to their commander." Captain Hyunwoo Kim's face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Velthor could see the bridge of a human ship. It was clean, efficient, and filled with technology the general did not recognize. But what struck him most was the calm confidence in the human's eyes. "General Velthor," Hyunwoo said, somehow knowing his name without being introduced. "You're here to destroy us, I assume?" "I am here to end your pathetic rebellion before it spreads," Velthor replied. "Surrender now and I will grant you the honor of quick deaths," Hyunwoo smiled. "Counteroffer. Surrender to us and we'll let most of your crews live. You personally, however, have some questions to answer about what your forces did to those families on Kelthara." The bridge of the Dominator fell silent. In 3,000 years of Imperial history, no enemy had ever demanded their surrender. The concept was so alien that some of the Imperial officers looked confused. "You face 500 Imperial warships with 60 primitive vessels," Velthor said slowly. "Are your species mentally deficient?" "No," Hyunwoo replied calmly. "We're just human. You'll understand the difference soon enough." The communication ended. General Velthor stared at the tactical display, trying to understand what he was seeing. Either these humans were the most arrogant fools in the galaxy, or they knew something he did not. "All ships advance to optimal firing range," he commanded. "Prepare for total destruction of enemy forces." The Imperial fleet moved forward like a wave of death. 500 ships in perfect formation, their weapons charging, their shields at maximum power. It was the most powerful military force ever assembled against a single enemy. Captain Byung-ho Nam commanded the UES Retribution, one of the newest human battleships that had arrived with Admiral Park's reinforcement fleet. As the Imperial ships closed distance, he activated humanity's greatest tactical innovation, the Neural Tactical Network. Every human ship became part of a single coordinated intelligence, not controlled by one commander, but linked together in a way that allowed instant communication and adaptation. Each captain retained command of their vessel, but all 60 ships could think and react as one entity. The Imperial formation was perfect for fighting enemies who used Imperial tactics. It was completely unprepared for what happened next. The human ships moved like a flock of birds, each vessel adjusting its position in response to microscopic changes in the others. They spread out, converged, separated, and reformed in patterns that seemed random but followed a logic the Imperials could not grasp. "What are they doing?" Velthor demanded. "Their formation is chaos." "Unknown, General," his tactical officer replied. "They appear to be moving without any central coordination, but their movements are precisely synchronized." General Velthor decided to end this quickly. "All ships open fire. Maximum spread pattern. Turn them to dust." 500 Imperial warships fired simultaneously. The space between the fleets lit up with enough energy to sterilize a planet. Massive plasma bolts and disruptor beams crossed the void, targeting the seemingly helpless human vessels. But the humans were no longer where the sensors said they should be. The neural network had predicted the Imperial firing pattern and moved every ship to optimal defensive positions in the microseconds between target lock and weapon discharge. Most of the Imperial shots missed entirely. Those that connected struck adaptive shields that had been specifically designed to counter Imperial weapons technology. Instead of destroying the human ships, the attack made their defenses stronger. "Impossible," breathed General Velthor. "Our weapons are the most powerful in the galaxy. How are their ships still intact?" Captain Nam smiled grimly as he watched his tactical display update. The Imperial attack had revealed the exact position, shield strength, and weapon configuration of every enemy ship. Information that was now shared instantly across the entire human fleet. "All ships," he transmitted, "commence Operation Thunderstorm." The human fleet attacked in a way that broke every rule of space combat the Imperials knew. Instead of concentrating firepower on single targets, they spread their attacks across dozens of enemy vessels simultaneously. Instead of maintaining formation, each ship moved independently while maintaining perfect coordination with the others. Quantum torpedoes launched from human ships reconfigured themselves during flight, adapting to exploit weaknesses in Imperial defenses that the humans had analyzed during the enemy's opening barrage. Energy weapons modulated their frequencies in real time to penetrate shields that should have been impregnable, but most devastating of all was the human ability to coordinate attacks across multiple targets simultaneously. While Imperial ships fought as individual units supported by their fleet, human vessels fought as a single organism with 60 different weapons platforms. The first wave of human attacks struck 50 Imperial ships at once. Shields failed, hulls buckled, and explosions began to chain through the enemy formation. But the humans were just getting started. "Impossible," General Velthor repeated, watching his perfect formation dissolve into chaos. "They're outnumbered 8-1. How are they winning?" His tactical officer worked frantically at his console. "General, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered. Each ship seems to know exactly where every other ship in their fleet is positioned. They're coordinating attacks across distances that should require light-speed communication delays." On the UES Defiance, Captain Hyunwoo Kim watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. The neural network allowed human forces to fight with precision that no other species had ever achieved. But more than that, it allowed them to fight with the one thing that had always made humans dangerous: pure creative chaos. "Target their command ships," he ordered. "Let's cut the head off the snake." Imperial doctrine required rigid command structures and predictable tactical responses. When human attacks destroyed the fleet coordination centers, the remaining Imperial ships found themselves unable to adapt to the constantly changing battlefield. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the space around Kelthera was filled with the wreckage of 500 Imperial warships. Every human ship survived, though several needed extensive repairs. General Velthor died when his flagship exploded under concentrated human fire. His last transmission was a confused report to Imperial Command. Enemy tactics impossible. Request immediate reinforcement. Cannot explain how they are doing this. Communications Officer Su-Jin Kang aboard the Defiance intercepted the Imperial distress signals and made sure they were broadcast across the galaxy. Every enslaved world, every resistance cell, every being who had given up hope heard the same message. The Empire was not invincible. On the slave world of Morthan, a Keltharian worker named Dalvin listened to the broadcast in amazement. 500 Imperial ships destroyed by 60 human vessels. It seemed impossible, but the wreckage signatures were real. The humans, he whispered to his fellow slaves. They actually did it. The whisper spread through the work camps, the mining colonies, the factory worlds. Humanity had kept its promise. The Empire could be beaten. Freedom was possible. But in the throne room of the Worldbreaker, Emperor Thakmor received the news in stunned silence. 500 ships, elite crews, the finest weapons the Empire possessed, all destroyed by a handful of primitives from an unknown world. How? He asked Supreme Admiral Gorthek. How is this possible? We do not know, Your Majesty, Gorthek replied, his voice hollow with shock. Their tactics are unlike anything we have encountered. They fight as if each ship can read the minds of all the others. Intelligence Officer Mordak stepped forward. Your Majesty, I believe we may have encountered something we have never faced before. A species that has spent its entire evolution fighting creatures as dangerous as themselves. They understand warfare in ways we cannot comprehend. Then we will learn, the Emperor snarled. Recall the 1st through 10th battle foe. The news spread faster than Imperial ships could contain it. On slave worlds across the galaxy, beings who had forgotten the meaning of hope suddenly remembered why their ancestors had fought for freedom. The impossible had happened. The Empire had been defeated in open battle. On the mining world of Corvash Prime, a worker named Corvel lifted his head from the ore extraction pit where he had labored for 30 years. The Imperial Overseer's whip had scarred his back countless times. But tonight he smiled for the first time since childhood. The humans destroyed 500 Imperial ships, whispered his cellmate, Dalmor, who had intercepted the battlefield transmissions on a hidden communicator. 500, Corvel, with only 60 ships of their own. Around them, other slaves stopped their endless digging. The story passed from mouth to mouth, growing with each telling. Humans who fought like legends, ships that could not be destroyed, an empire that suddenly seemed less eternal than it had that morning. Impossible, grunted Theknor, an older slave whose spirit had been broken decades ago. The Empire always wins. They always win. But even as he spoke, Theknor's eyes held a spark that had been dead for years. In the depths of space, Colonel Moonsik Choi brought the 3rd human fleet out of hyperspace near the Vorthak supply depot at Nexus 7. 25 ships, including 2 massive support vessels filled with something the galaxy had never seen before. Hope in physical form. Begin transmission, Moonsik ordered his communications officer. The message went out on all frequencies, in every language the humans had learned from freed slaves. This is Colonel Moonsik Choi of the Human Liberation Forces. We bring supplies, weapons, and training to any who would fight for their freedom. The Empire's rule ends now, but we cannot do this alone. We need you to stand up. We need you to fight. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Distress beacons from 100 worlds suddenly changed their messages. Instead of crying for help, they began organizing resistance networks. Species that had been enemies under Imperial rule began coordinating attacks against their oppressors. Dr. Gae-Young Yu established the first interspecies medical corps on the liberated world of Kelthara. Her field hospitals became symbols of something the galaxy had not seen in millennia. Different species working together for something other than the Empire's benefit. The Keltharians have developed immunity to most Imperial pacification drugs, she reported to Captain Kim via secured transmission. Their physiology adapted over generations of forced medication. We can use this knowledge to help other enslaved species. Her medical teams included humans, liberated Keltharians, escaped crystal beings from Altera, and even defectors from the Empire's slave soldier programs. Together, they treated wounds that went far deeper than flesh. Captain Sung Min Ju commanded the stealth frigate UES Ghost, one of humanity's most advanced vessels. His mission was different from the main fleet's open warfare. He struck deep in Imperial space, rescuing slaves from the Empire's most secure facilities and broadcasting the truth to worlds that had never heard it. Stealth insertion. Successful, he reported to Admiral Park. We've extracted 1,200 slaves from the Fortress of Despair. Among them are technical specialists who know the Empire's weaknesses. They're volunteering to help us. The fortress had been considered impregnable for 1,000 years, but human stealth technology was based on principles the Empire had never encountered: ships that could phase between dimensions, weapons that struck from impossible angles, soldiers who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. But the Empire's response was swift and brutal. Emperor Thakmor himself took direct command of the Imperial war effort. His orders went out to every sector commander. Any world that showed signs of rebellion would be destroyed completely. Not conquered, not pacified, but utterly annihilated as an example to others. The first target was Morthen, an agricultural world where slaves had begun organizing resistance cells. Imperial dreadnoughts arrived in orbit and began systematic bombardment. Within 6 hours, a planet that had fed billions across the galaxy was reduced to burning wasteland. But instead of crushing the rebellion, the atrocity had the opposite effect. The massacre at Morthen became a rallying cry that spread to every corner of the galaxy. Species that had accepted Imperial rule for centuries suddenly remembered what they were fighting for. On Corvash Prime, Corval gathered his fellow slaves in the deepest mining tunnels where Imperial sensors could not reach. They killed everyone on Morthen, he said quietly. Men, women, children, everyone, because some of them dared to dream of freedom. The slaves listened in silence. Many wept, but their tears were not just of sorrow. Tomorrow, the morning shift will be different, Corval continued. Instead of mining ore for the Empire, we will be mining weapons. The humans have sent us the plans. We have the materials. All we need is the courage to use them. Dalmor stood up slowly. I have been a slave for 40 years, he said. My children were taken from me when they were 5 years old. I will never see them again. But maybe if we fight, other children will grow up free. One by one, every slave in the tunnel stood. Within hours, similar meetings were happening on 1,000 worlds. The Empire had ruled through fear for 3 millennia. Now that fear was being replaced by something far more dangerous: righteous anger. Captain Byung-ho Nam received urgent orders to reinforce the liberation of the Zephyr system, where the insectoid hive minds had been enslaved for 800 years. The Zephyrians were natural soldiers, but Imperial control collars had turned them into mindless drones. Medical Officer Ga Young, we need a way to remove those control devices without killing the hosts, Nam requested. Dr. Yu had been studying Imperial slave technology with growing horror and determination. I think we can do it, Captain. But we'll need to capture an Imperial control station intact. The removal process requires the original programming codes. The assault on Zephyr Control Station 7 became a legend among liberation forces. Human stealth teams, Keltharian technical specialists, and freed Alterian crystal singers worked together in perfect coordination. They captured the station in 12 minutes without firing a single shot, using a combination of human tactics and alien abilities that the Empire could not have imagined. Within hours, the first free Zephyrian in 8 centuries opened her compound eyes and spoke her own name, instead of a slave registration number. The hive mind that had been broken and scattered began to reform, but this time with knowledge of human tactical doctrine integrated into their collective consciousness. We remember, the Zephyrian, Queen transmitted to Captain Nam. We remember what we were before they broke us, and we remember what they did to our young. The Empire will pay for every stolen life. Commander Taehyun Shin established training camps on liberated worlds, teaching alien resistance fighters how to use captured Imperial weapons and improvised explosives. But more importantly, he taught them something the Empire had spent centuries trying to erase: how to work together. Every species has strengths, he explained to a mixed group of Keltharians, Alterian fragments and escaped Corvash miners. Humans adapt quickly and think creatively. Keltharians understand technology better than anyone. Alterians can communicate across vast distances instantly. Corvash are stronger than any Imperial soldier. Separately, we are easy prey. Together we are unstoppable. The training camps became universities of revolution. Former slaves learned not just how to fight, but how to organize supply lines, establish secure communications, and coordinate attacks across multiple star systems. They learned the human doctrine of leave no one behind, and the revolutionary concept that every being deserved freedom, regardless of species or origin. Intelligence Officer Su-Jin Kang intercepted Imperial communications showing the Empire's growing desperation. Captain Kim, they're recalling fleets from the Outer Rim. Over 200,000 ships are being repositioned to core sectors. They're abandoning frontier worlds to concentrate their forces. But this tactical withdrawal created opportunities that human strategists were quick to exploit. Entire sectors suddenly found themselves without Imperial presence for the first time in centuries. Rebellions that had been brewing in secret burst into open warfare. Captain Sheng Minju's stealth operations expanded to include coordinated strikes on Imperial supply lines. "We're not just rescuing slaves anymore," he reported. "We're crippling their ability to maintain their war machine. Every freed technical specialist gives us more insight into their weaknesses." The Imperial war machine was vast, but it had been designed to maintain control over a passive population, not to fight a coordinated insurgency spread across thousands of worlds. Supply lines that had operated for centuries without interference suddenly became targets for sabotage. Manufacturing centers found their slave workers transformed into guerrilla fighters. Dr. Won-Young Lee, working from a mobile research station, made breakthrough discoveries by studying the psychological profiles of freed Imperial slaves. "Captain, the Empire's control methods have created a uniform weakness across all their forces. They rely on rigid hierarchy and predictable responses. When we disrupt their command structure, their entire tactical doctrine collapses." This knowledge became the founder. The grand fleet of the Vorthak Empire gathered at their home system like a storm cloud of metal and death. 3 million ships surrounded Vorthak Prime in the greatest defensive formation in galactic history. Every vessel the Empire had ever built, every weapon they had ever forged, every soldier they had ever trained now stood ready for the final battle. Emperor Thakmor stood in the command center of his massive flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The rebellion had spread far, but now it would end. Here at the heart of his power, surrounded by the full might of 3,000 years of conquest, he would crush these human insects and their alien allies forever. "Status of the fleet?" he demanded. Supreme Admiral Gorthek consulted his readouts. 3,200,000 combat vessels, Your Majesty. Every battleship, every cruiser, every fighter in the Empire. The orbital defense platforms are online. The planetary shields are at maximum power. Nothing could possibly break through our defenses. And the enemy? Intelligence suggests they are gathering their forces at the edge of the system. Perhaps 100,000 ships total. Mixed human and alien vessels? Emperor Thakmor laughed coldly. 100,000 against 3 million. Even if these humans possessed superior tactics, the mathematics were simple. No amount of clever maneuvering could overcome such overwhelming numerical superiority. But 50 light-years away, Admiral Young-Ho Park stood on the bridge of the UES Liberation, studying the same tactical situation from a very different perspective. Around him, the combined Liberation fleet represented something the galaxy had never seen before. Dozens of species working together in perfect harmony. "Final fleet count?" he asked his operations officer. 97,000 combat vessels. "Admiral," replied Commander Hei-Wan-Jung. 15,000 human ships, 30,000 liberated Imperial vessels under new crews, and 52,000 ships from allied species. "Every freed world has contributed something to this fleet." Admiral Park nodded. The numbers were daunting. But numbers had never been humanity's primary advantage. "What about our special assets?" Captain Min Su-han, now commanding the elite integrated fighter squadrons, smiled grimly. "All pilots ready, Admiral. Human, Keltharian, Alterian, Zephyrian, and Corvash crews working in perfect coordination. The enemy has never faced anything like what we're about to show them," Engineer Woojin Lim reported from the Fleet Support Division. "Supply lines secure, Admiral. Mobile repair facilities operational. We can maintain combat operations indefinitely." Communications Specialist Ye Jin coordinated the impossible. Real-time tactical communication across a fleet spanning light-years of space. "Neural network online and synchronized, Admiral. All ships reporting ready for coordinated operations." But the most significant presence in the Liberation fleet was not technological. It was the freed slaves themselves, now serving as technical specialists, tactical advisors, and crew members aboard ships that flew under the banner of freedom rather than oppression. Captain Hyun Woo Kim, whose single ship had started this galactic revolution, now commanded a wing of the Liberation Fleet. His original crew from the Defiance had been promoted to senior positions, but they still served together in the final battle for the galaxy's soul. All ships, Admiral Park transmitted across the fleet. This is the moment we have fought toward. The Empire has gathered everything they have at Vorthak Prime. They believe their numbers will save them. They are about to learn that freedom is more powerful than fear. The Liberation Fleet jumped to hyperspace in perfect synchronization, 97,000 ships moving as one entity, guided by human tactical doctrine and enhanced by the unique abilities of dozens of allied species. They emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Vorthak system to find exactly what they expected: the most powerful military force in galactic history, waiting for them in perfect defensive formation. Emperor Thakmor smiled as sensor readings confirmed the enemy fleet's composition. Less than 100,000 ships. They must be insane to attack us here. But Intelligence Officer Mordak studied the enemy formation with growing unease. Your Majesty, their positioning is unusual. They appear to be arranged in some kind of geometric pattern that serves no tactical purpose we can identify. It does not matter, the Emperor declared. All ships advance and destroy the enemy fleet. Show the galaxy what happens to those who challenge the Empire. The Imperial Grand Fleet moved forward like an avalanche of destruction. 3 million ships in perfect formation, their combined firepower capable of sterilizing entire sectors. It was the most overwhelming display of military might the universe had ever witnessed. But as they advanced, the Liberation Fleet did something unexpected. Instead of retreating or forming defensive lines, they spread out into what appeared to be a random scatter pattern. To Imperial tactical officers, it looked like panic. They're breaking formation, reported General Morthek with satisfaction. The humans realize they cannot win. They're trying to flee. But Captain Kim smiled as he watched the tactical display. The Liberation Fleet was not scattering in panic. They were implementing a battle plan that utilized every lesson learned from months of fighting the Empire, a plan that required coordination between species that had been enemies for millennia. Phase 1, Admiral Park transmitted. Execute Operation Starburst. The Liberation Fleet suddenly accelerated to speeds the Imperial forces did not think possible. But more than speed, they moved with precision that defied explanation. 97,000 ships maneuvering as if controlled by a single mind, following flight paths that seemed to dance between Imperial fire. The secret was the evolution of the neural tactical network. What had started as a human innovation had been enhanced by Alterian telepathic communication, Zephyrian hive mind processing, Keltharian technical analysis, and the spatial awareness of a dozen other species. The Liberation Fleet was not just coordinated. It was a single intelligence operating through thousands of individual vessels. The first Imperial salvo missed almost entirely. Weapons designed to destroy fleets in conventional formation found empty space where their targets should have been. The few hits that connected struck adaptive shields that had been improved far beyond their original specifications. Impossible, breathed Emperor Thakmor. How are they avoiding our fire? Their movement patterns are predicting our targeting solutions, reported his tactical officer in amazement. They know where we're going to shoot before we shoot. But the Liberation Fleet was just getting started. As they moved through the Imperial formation, they began implementing tactics that no single species could have conceived. Human creativity, Alterian intuition, Zephyrian logic, and Keltharian technical expertise combined into strategies that broke every rule of space warfare. Instead of engaging the Imperial fleet in direct combat, Liberation ships began targeting the complex communication networks that held the massive enemy formation together. Disrupted command signals caused Imperial ships to fire on each other. Hacked tactical computers sent enemy vessels collision courses. Sabotage supply lines caused weapon systems to malfunction at critical moments. Captain Min-Soo Han led his integrated fighter squadrons in attacks that redefined the possible. Human pilots provided creativity and adaptability. Keltharian technical specialists identified system vulnerabilities in real time. Alterian navigators coordinated strikes across impossible distances. Zephyrian tacticians processed battle data faster than any computer. This is Squadron Leader Han. he transmitted as his mixed-species pilots carved through Imperial formations like a sword through paper. Target the command nodes. Let's cut their strings and watch them dance. Engineer Lim's technical crews performed miracles of battlefield maintenance and innovation. When Imperial weapons adapted to liberation technology, human engineers adapted faster. When enemy tactics evolved, Allied technical specialists evolved faster still. The battle raged for 3 days across the Vorthak system. But as it continued, a terrible truth became apparent to the Imperial forces. They were losing. Despite their overwhelming numerical advantage, despite fighting in their home system with every possible defensive advantage, the Empire was being systematically destroyed. The turning point came when Captain Hyunwoo Kim led a strike force directly toward the Emperor's flagship. The Eternal Dominion was the largest vessel ever built, protected by shields that could withstand the explosion of stars and armed with weapons that could crack planets. But size and power meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight by conventional rules. Kim's strike force included ships from every allied species, each contributing unique capabilities to a coordinated assault that the Empire's designers had never imagined. Keltharian technical specialists disabled the ship's defensive systems. Alterian telepaths disrupted crew coordination. Zephyrian tacticians identified weak points in the massive structure. Human pilots executed impossible maneuvers that brought them through defenses that should have been impregnable. Emperor Thakmor watched his fleet die around him with growing horror and disbelief. This was not possible. The Empire had ruled for 3,000 years. They had conquered every species they had ever encountered. 6 months after the fall of Vorthak Prime, Captain Hyunwoo Kim stood in the ruins of what had once been the Empire's greatest slave processing center. The facility on Morgoth had held 10 million beings in conditions that defied imagination. Now it was empty except for the ghosts of those who had died there and the few survivors who had returned to bear witness. Dr. Ji Hai, one knelt beside a memorial wall where freed slaves had carved the names of those who did not live to see freedom. Her medical scanner could detect nothing physically wrong with her, but Kim could see the weight of what they had discovered crushing down on her shoulders. "Captain," she said quietly, "we found mass graves extending for kilometers in every direction. The Empire did not just enslave people, they conducted experiments on them, breeding programs, torture research. They were trying to create the perfect slave species by combining the worst fears of every race they conquered." Kim nodded grimly. Every day brought new revelations about the true scope of Imperial atrocities. What they had seen on the surface during their battles was nothing compared to the systematic horror that had been hidden in facilities like this one across the galaxy. "Any survivors who can testify?" he asked. "Hundreds," Dr. Wan replied, "but most of them are so traumatized they cannot speak. The Empire broke their minds as thoroughly as they broke their bodies. It will take generations to heal this kind of damage." Admiral So Young Park's voice crackled through Kim's communicator. "Captain, we need you at the Reconstruction Council meeting. We have a problem." The Galactic Reconstruction Council had been meeting for months on the liberated world of Kelthara, trying to forge a new government for the free galaxy. But every session brought new challenges that no one had anticipated. Freedom, it turned out, was much harder to build than it was to fight for. Kim arrived at the council chambers to find representatives from 40 species arguing loudly in a dozen different languages. The translation systems were working overtime, but the real problem was not communication. It was the simple fact that beings who had been enslaved for centuries had no experience with cooperation. "The Korvash delegation demands the right to execute all former Imperial citizens," announced Corvel, the former gladiator who now spoke for his people. His scarred hands slammed against the table as he spoke. "They enslaved us for 800 years. They deserve death." "Revenge will not rebuild our worlds," replied Telana, speaking for the Alterian Crystal Singers. Her translucent form shimmered with emotional distress. "We need the technical knowledge that Imperial citizens possess. Killing them serves no purpose." Admiral Park called for order, but the shouting continued. The Zephyrian hive mind representative buzzed angrily about the need for perfect justice. The Keltharian delegates wanted to focus on practical reconstruction. Former Imperial slave soldiers who had joined the liberation demanded the right to return to their home worlds, even though many of those worlds no longer wanted them. Kim listened to the arguments and felt a deep weariness settle in his bones. They had won the war, but winning the peace was proving to be an even greater challenge. Commander Tae-hyun Shin entered the chamber and whispered urgently in Kim's ear. "Sir, we have reports of fighting on 17 liberated worlds. Former slave populations are attacking each other over resources, territory, and old grievances. Without imperial control, they are reverting to ancient conflicts that predate the empire. On the world of Nexara, species that had worked side by side in imperial mines were now fighting brutal territorial wars. The Vektari remembered that the Morgon had betrayed their ancestors to imperial slavers 3 centuries ago. The Morgon remembered that the Vektari had collaborated with imperial overseers to get better treatment. Neither could forget. Neither could forgive. Captain Min Soo-han reported similar problems from his patrol sector. "Sir, the former imperial shipyards on Korthek have gone silent. When we investigated, we found that the different species working there had segregated themselves into ethnic groups and stopped cooperating. Production has fallen to 10% of pre-liberation levels. The liberation had freed billions of beings from physical slavery, but it had also revealed the deeper chains that bound them. Fear, hatred, prejudice, and trauma that had been suppressed under imperial rule now exploded into violence that threatened to tear the galaxy apart. Dr. Gae-young-yu worked tirelessly in her medical centers, but she was treating wounds that went far beyond the physical. Captain Kim, we are seeing epidemic levels of what humans would call post-traumatic stress disorder among the freed populations. But it is complicated by the fact that different species process trauma in completely different ways. Can you help them?" Kim asked. "Some of them, yes. But Captain, many of these beings have never known anything but slavery. They do not know how to make decisions for themselves. They do not know how to trust others. They do not even know what they want freedom to look like." Engineer Woojin Lim faced similar challenges in his reconstruction efforts. "Sir, we have the technology to rebuild everything the Empire destroyed. But the freed populations cannot agree on what should be rebuilt or how it should be done. Every decision requires negotiation between species that have been trained to compete rather than cooperate." The problems were not limited to the former slave populations. Many imperial citizens who had lived comfortable lives under the old system now found themselves refugees in a galaxy that held them responsible for centuries of oppression. Some deserved punishment, but others had been ordinary people living in the only system they had ever known. Captain Seung-min Ju reported from the Outer Rim territories. "Sir, we have over 1 million imperial refugees in camps along the border sectors. Most of them are civilian families who never participated in slavery or conquest. But no liberated world will accept them, and they cannot return to imperial space because it no longer exists." Communications specialist Ye Jin. O monitored transmissions across the galaxy and brought increasingly disturbing reports. "Captain, we are detecting organized crime syndicates forming in the power vacuum left by imperial collapse. Former slave soldiers are selling their services as mercenaries. Some liberated worlds are reinstating slavery, but now they are enslaving former imperial citizens instead of the other way around. The dream of galactic unity that had sustained the liberation forces during the war was crumbling. In the harsh reality of peace, species that had fought together against the Empire were now fighting each other over the spoils of victory. In his private quarters aboard the Liberation, Kim stared out at the stars and wondered if they had simply replaced one form of tyranny with another. The Empire had been evil, but it had also been stable. Now the galaxy was free, but it was also chaos. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Wan entered carrying 2 cups of earth coffee, a luxury that had become precious in the Outer Rim. "You look like a man carrying the weight of the galaxy," she observed, sitting across from him. "Maybe I am," Kim replied wearily. "We fought so hard to free everyone. But freedom without order is just another form of suffering." "Is that what you think? That we made a mistake?" Kim considered the question carefully. "No, the Empire had to fall. But I think we were naive about what would happen after. We assumed that all these different species would naturally want to work together once they were free. We did not consider that they might want to settle old scores first." Dr. Wan sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "Perhaps freedom was never the end goal, Captain. Perhaps it was just the beginning. Perhaps the real work starts now." Over the following weeks, Kim found himself thinking more and more about her words. The liberation forces had proven that impossible military victories could be achieved through cooperation and determination. But building a lasting peace would require different skills entirely. The answer, when it came, was surprisingly simple. Instead of trying to force different species to work together on a galactic scale, the Reconstruction Council began focusing on smaller, local partnerships. Humans would partner with one species at a time, helping them solve specific problems while gradually building trust and cooperation. On Nexara, human mediators worked with Vectari and Morgon leaders to establish truth and reconciliation tribunals. Instead of punishing ancient grievances, they focused on acknowledging past hurts and finding ways to prevent future conflicts. On Korthek, human engineers worked alongside Keltharian technical specialists to redesign the shipyards for integrated cooperation. Instead of forcing different species to work in the same spaces, they created interconnected facilities that allowed each group to contribute their unique strengths. Captain Kim established the Human Integration Corps, a specialized force dedicated not to military conquest, but to the harder task of building lasting peace. "We will not impose our values on anyone," he announced at the Reconstruction Council, "but we will offer our help to any who want to build something better than what came before." The work was slow, frustrating, and often heartbreaking. For every success, there were dozen failures. For every world that found peace, there were others that descended into chaos. But gradually, slowly, the galaxy began to heal. Years later, Kim would look back on this period as the most important of his life.